Downtown Tucson, Arizona. This is the site when I met James Parrillo. It was a coincidence, and it was a lovely one because James is a spectacular person in my eyes. He gave me a lot of information. We talked a lot off camera. I learned quite a bit about the correctional facilities and how they're operated. Things that we really don't get documented. This is a place where I met him at a cafe called Shot in the Dark. He was paralyzed. Had nowhere to go, didn't know what to do. And he was stranded here, snowing for the first time in God knows how long. Oh, we're already recording. This is James Parrillo. He's got quite the story. My name is Lee Bracker, Dismantled Lean Project. And I met this gentleman this morning here at a coffee shop downtown Tucson, Arizona. And he's just making a lot of racket there. I know this camera picks up a lot of noise and stuff like that, but this guy is quite the story, and I'd like him to tell you a little bit about what happened to him. But before he starts talking, you know, this whole bit about Greenpeace, I've always questioned it. Before I ever woke up and became aware. Oh, we got a motorcycle in the background. Okay. Ha ha ha. Well, that's all right. This is all raw stuff. That guy's zipping up and he's about ready to go. Let's see how long it takes him to go. Well, anyway, we'll just, can always record this over again. Back during the days when O.J. Simpson was going through his stint in the court system and the whole deal, we didn't know what was really going on out there in the ocean waters. But what people were doing was they were trying to save the whales. And James here is one of those guys. Never hurt anybody, never had any intention of hurting anybody. He was just out there trying to save the world, just like all of us are trying to do. I'd like him to tell you his story, because if I do it, then it won't be any fun. How you doing, James?
Back in 1994, I was an activist for Greenpeace. Protesting petitions, and they pretty much so indoctrinated images of whales dying constantly. Well, it turned out one of the whaling companies had a yacht that cost $17 million in profits from whales coming into Fort Lauderdale, and it was suggested to us to basically get a hold of it, storm it, and sink it. And during that incident, the two other members of Greenpeace fled, and I was shot twice and had a standoff with the SWAT team in Fort Lauderdale and Metro-Dade and Broward County and the FBI, which involved blocking off the intercoastal and shots fired. And the only person that was wounded was myself. And I was charged with over 28 felonies. I was tried and took 3 years to go to trial. And Greenpeace basically, they paid for my lawyer and asked me to sign a waiver saying that they weren't involved. They blew me off, and I received 19 years in prison. And I just got out. And have never heard anything from Greenpeace the whole time I was in prison. Never heard anything from them since I've been out. And
sort of left you for dead, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. And while I was in the prison, I was called a terrorist, and I was held in the underground prison in Colorado, ADX, Lewisburg's maximum security segregated housing unit.
Explain to us a little bit about what ADX is.
ADX is an underground prison with no human contact. You're in a cell with a TV monitor to read your mail, and there's a shower built in the cell, or they have to cuff you up and put a black box in your cuffs and take you to the shower, then uncuff you, and you take a shower, go back. And you only get to shower twice a week, and you only go outside twice a week for 30 minutes in a dog kennel.
How far underground were you?
I was 4 stories. The building is actually 8 stories underground.
Is it anywhere near Denver?
Yeah, it is. It's Florence, Colorado.
And is it connected to the underground base at the airport?
There's actually 2 bases connected to it, and they're both, one's military, one's commercial. So they, when they transport us or they move us, you know, people think that the judicial system, you know, you're in prison, they take care of you and all this. And I've heard all these stories of you guys have it really easy in prison. I spent weeks being kicked, beaten, you know, maced, CS gassed, because they think it's their inevitable right as officers, you know, law enforcement officers, to abuse us because they say that we broke the law, we're felons, so we deserve everything we get.
Explain to us a little bit about what CX gas is.
CS gas is a nerve agent. When it sprays in the room, it swells up your face, it swells up your throat, you can't breathe, you become very disoriented.
You told me a little story about that gentleman that was a young kid.
They told him to stand up and talk to him, and he said, "Why? You can see me from right here."
They were doing it through the slit in
Yeah,
the door.
the slot, the food slot. They actually threw some CS gas in there and left him in there for damn near an hour. It was like 45 minutes. And he came back. They still didn't take him out. They talked to him for a minute and left him in there with it. The problem with CS gas is it doesn't filter out real easily. It films everything in the room. And one reason they don't want to take you out right away and they leave you in there is because they'll suffer the effects of CS gas too. And if you try to rinse it off with water, it makes it worse. It actually becomes more inflamed. And the first thing the cop will tell you is go ahead and rinse it off in your sink, and then your face just swells almost shut.
I'm going to move my camera a little bit because the table moves. There we go.
So, you know, there's quite a few incidents that went on in the federal system, the Broward County system of abuses. I mean, I can't even count all the abuses I've seen. I mean, it's heartbreaking to think of what they're doing to people.
You ever hear from Greenpeace while you were in there? For the whole, I think you mentioned that you were in there for about 15 years.
Yeah. In ADX.
And then the 4 years prior to that, they had you in isolation, is what it was?
I'm sorry?
They had you in isolation. Now we got to wait for all these vehicles to go by. This is a very professionally done interview, by the way, in a studio on the streets of downtown Tucson.
The 4 years, Greenpeace, the first four years, Greenpeace was like trying to get me to sign waivers, and they were working through my attorney. They didn't have a lot of direct contact with me, and because they didn't want to get sued. You know, stuff like this happens. They go after Greenpeace for money, and Greenpeace is more about money than it is environmental anything. That's why if you look at what they're doing now, they're
Well, it
selling
is
out.
now, but at that time, were they really about money?
They still, you know, they were, but it just wasn't as prolific as it is now.
Okay.
You know, it's more transparent now than it was then. You know, now they're endorsing oil companies that have spills, or yeah, they did a good job of trying to clean it up. They actually started to endorse BP over their spill in the Gulf. And you look at that and you're like, what are you even thinking? I mean, the devastation of an oil spill like BP, not only should they be boycotting BP, they should turn around and be flying banners everywhere about how bad BP did on the cleanup.
Well, they did a really good job in keeping people out of there. They didn't have
What
any
they did was, you know that when you get a well, and BP had one well over a 100-year oil field. So much for all the, we're about to run out of oil stuff. This field that they have out there is supposed to run 100 years if they keep pumping at the rate they're going. BP wanted to install another wellhead. Can't do that because the laws have changed about drilling and they weren't allowed to. It's really funny though that the wellhead broke over a $30 piece that should have been in stock on the rig to begin with. Then it took them all the drama of trying to close the well, but if anybody looks at the schematics or the blueprints of what they did end up doing, they drilled 2 new wells next to the old one. And then when they got almost to depth, they diagonally went in and filled it with cement. Those 2 wells that they drilled were operational. They didn't even have to pay permits. They didn't have to get permission. They didn't have to get rights. Now how many wellheads do they have sitting out there? 2. And Greenpeace endorses this.
You know, that was the platform Horizon
Yeah.
that went down, and the Atlantis was out there. I have a friend that worked on the Atlantis at the time of the BP spill. I asked him, I said, his name was Cooter, Cooter Honeycutt. Cooter, tell me a little bit about what happened there. And he didn't really want to talk because, you know, but I finally got him talking, and he's a good old boy, you know. He's just one of those mechanic type of guys. And he said, you know, they could have stopped that day, just pour cement down there, but they didn't want it because he talked about how hush-hush their higher-ups were, and they were really keeping it.
They wanted to be able to drill the field at their rate.
Yeah,
You know,
they had to.
I mean, do you think BP came out of pocket billions of dollars that they didn't have to for the cleanup?
No, of course not.
They put a tariff on those things, saying you only $75 million at the end of the deal.
Yeah.
They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars to clean this up and to pacify and pay people off. They pay off the fishermen. Oh yeah, you can't make a living here, we'll pay you to make a living. You know, you think they did all that just for good karma?
You know, we were talking about Greenpeace. I wonder what they had done during that time. Now, I followed the British Petroleum spill, and I was doing that for different reasons. We were trying to figure out if they were planting a nuclear bomb down there, some kind of neutron bomb or something. And
Which was discussed to be able to close.
yeah, it really was. But they were going to do it for other intentions, to get all that methane and all that oil up there, maybe create a big fire, you know, that would just emblazon that whole area and really cause havoc there. But even worse, I won't get into it because Greenpeace is something that I really want to kind of focus on, because they would have been the people, I guess, that would have been out there protesting because of, you know, we had the dolphin die-off and all the other different aquatic animals. At that time, they were literally stopping the Gulf Stream, right? And now it's stopped. It won't even go up to Europe. So I don't know what their crop yields are, but that's devastating for Europe. You know, when they don't get that warm water going up there. But
they get the torrential cold.
All the wildlife, you know, and they came out with that cartoon. Remember? Forget the name of it, of the little fish that flushes down the toilet and has to find Nemo. Well, that was all about the Gulf Stream. And they do things like that because they know they're going to do something devastating, so they want the kids indoctrinated into the idea that it once was kind of beautiful down there. That cartoon animated film Ants, same thing. You don't even see ant trails anymore. They've wiped out the whole ant population, at least here in the city that I noticed. I could go on a picnic and have a great time without worrying about ants anymore. You know, so we see these things in film. But what did Greenpeace do, or any kind of activist group? Did they try to infiltrate in there and see what the hell was going on during the British Petroleum spill?
No, they didn't have to. British Petroleum went to Greenpeace and sat there and said, okay, look, we want you to endorse what we're doing. You know, that we're trying, we're cleaning up, we're doing the best we can. And Greenpeace literally went in there and endorsed what they're doing. But if you actually look at Greenpeace's book, you know, money flows in, money flows out. Money flowing in that came from subsidiaries of British Petroleum Greenpeace just bought a new ship. The whole country and most of the world is in a recession, depression, whichever word you want to use. And all of a sudden they have enough money to purchase a new ship.
Where'd they get that money from? Of
Yeah,
course,
and they
probably
bought it from
federal.
the Russian government. It's another icebreaker. Those aren't cheap.
Yeah, who funded that?
They're my best guess, without looking at their books, it came too much in line with BP's endorsement. So, and Greenpeace to endorse an oil spill, I mean, what can you possibly be thinking to endorse an oil spill and you're an environmental group?
Well, it's a
But
swap
you're
out of
bashing
people.
Apple every chance you get because Apple won't pay you.
Who were the people that got swapped out then? For who ended up being a higher up in Greenpeace?
Oh, you talking about Paul Watson? Paul Watson he's on the Sea Shepherd now. He's the head he's the head of the whole whale defense, the show Whale Wars. And Paul Watson was one of the main founders of Greenpeace. And because he wouldn't tolerate the endorsements, because he wanted to be more radical, and actually go out there and stop them from whaling. And he did accomplish, and has accomplished quite a bit. They turned around and Greenpeace threw him out. He was one of the founders. How do you throw one of the founders out? And Paul, he's one of the few people, when he started his show, Whale Wars, he literally got to the point where the Japanese packed up and went home early the first year because he was there. That tells you that he's effective.
Oh, yeah.
And in the meantime, even on one of his shows, I love this. I saw this show on the YouTube. I looked it up, and they couldn't find the Japanese fleet. The Japanese fleet was killing whales, and Paul
Japanese fleet, now what?
was killing whales.
Okay.
And Paul wanted to know where the fleet was, so he'd go over and get between the whales. That's the whole thing, is get between the whales and the harpoon ship. And so the only other ship in the region was one of Greenpeace's ships. And I believe it was the Esperanza. And they called the Esperanza, and Greenpeace point blank told them, we don't want to talk to you, and we wouldn't tell you where they were if they were killing them right in front of us. And hung up the phone. They told his first mate this. They have it on video and audio, and it's just amazing to me, Greenpeace being what they tried to portray themselves to me, that I was so dedicated to them. And what they are now is just two different entities. They're just as capitalist. They don't care about anything. They will bash your company till you literally pay money.
I got a little story for you, and not a lot of people are aware of this, but I did a paper on mineral deficiency. But when Bill Wilson was spearheading Alcoholics Anonymous, what happened was he was finding like vitamin B3 or niacin to be very helpful for schizophrenics and alcoholics alike. And then he dabbled in LSD and other things, but they were looking for ways to keep people sober. But because the whole medical community was integrated now in AA, they ousted him out, just like this Tom or Paul Watson? Paul Watson. It's the same dynamics where they put in indoctrinated people or infiltrators, and they don't even know what they're doing. They're just following the step-by-step things that have been installed by the secret societies, because it was actually the Rockefellers that did AA. But we have our government doing it with, these Greenpeace, tree hug, and then the tree huggers. I don't know what all the different other ones are, but our gun rights. The NRA is infiltrated now, and so now they're trying to do what they're not supposed to do, and that's allow these restrictive gun laws.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll shut up because this is the important guy to listen to here. Oh, yeah.
The thing about it is you have to, with anything else, and I think at this point in my career, which is non-existent at this point, that people need to be more cautious, and they need to really investigate anything that they get involved in. I don't care what it is.
Well, absolutely, I agree. And just real quick, and I won't even say anymore, I didn't get involved with your occupy this and occupy that. None of that stuff. Because
I didn't get a chance.
yeah, well, good for you.
I
I get to start you off fresh.
I was occupied already.
No shit.
Actually, I guess I was involved because I was in an occupied federal facility, and I wasn't leaving. But I just think people really need to not only look at. They need to look at. They need to look at their books. They need to look at their track record. They need to look at what they're actually doing. I think organizations like Greenpeace, Sea Shepherd, WWF, PETA, you all need to open up your books and then let people decide if what they're actually getting involved with, what their money is actually going for. If you can sit there, and I don't know if a lot of people have been to other countries, if you go to Mexico, if you go to England, if you go to France, Greenpeace has actual 60-second commercials that air 12 times a day, 14 times a day. How much money do you think they're spending for being a nonprofit that's taking all in donations? How much are they spending to have those TV air shows to get more donations? Instead of doing that, why don't they actually start addressing the issues? Our coastal erosion in California, the kelp forest erosion in California, the fact that Florida's overfished, that chemicals are being poured in, medical supplies are going in the Pacific Ocean, and different oil and chemicals are being poured into the Gulf, that the Mississippi River's eroding, that species of marine life are completely disappearing. I challenge anybody to go to California and bring me 5 sea otters. Actually, catch 5 live sea otters anywhere on the coast of California anymore. The reason that they're gone is because we've killed them all off with pollution.
Yeah, and there's sea lions and there's other things too.
But here's the best part. Now they're complaining that the kelp forests are disappearing. You know what's killing the kelp forests? Sea urchins. Sea urchins eat the base of seaweed. What was the #1 munchie on a sea otter's food chain?
I guess the sea urchin.
Sea urchins. So when there's no check and balance system and you have the sea otter completely gone, now the sea urchins are multiplying 500 times faster than they were before. They're eating the kelp. The kelp is actually floating up on the shoreline. Now the kelp was there as almost like a barrier reef. It slows the tides down. It also houses, Garibaldi's, blue sharks, yellow sharks, black tips, all the marine life. That was their ecosystem. Now that's floating away. The tide no longer.
You'll probably have to repeat that one.
The tide no longer at this point has a resistance. Now it's eroding the shoreline because there's no natural reef break with the kelp forest being gone. You try to explain this to people and they just think, well, the sea otter became extinct. No, we killed it off. We don't take care of what we have in front of us.
Yeah, they're methodically doing it and they know it. I've been watching it here just in an urban society, just with the bird population, the rodents, the rabbit,
kid fox, the desert tortoise,
all of those
go
things.
down the list.
But it's it's really hurting the chemtrails. It comes down and it alkalinizes the soil, so we're losing our bacterial count, microorganisms and so forth. We don't get new growth. When it rains, there's no new weeds or anything. It's just established bushes and trees that are still surviving because they got a root system.
Well, one of the reasons that you don't hear too much about the sea otter and everything is because California, if you've ever been out to California, Santa Barbara is supposed to be one of the most beautiful areas in the world. You stand on their coast and you look out and you see 12 oil rigs.
Oh, it's disgusting.
Yeah, all of California.
I remember being out there, I get oil on my feet. I went to a gas station once and asked if I could have some solvent to get the oil splotches off the soles of my feet. They wouldn't do it. I said, well, those are your goddamn oil wells out there, you know.
Well, they talk about slant drilling. Drilling an oil rig off the coastline on the San
Oh! Boy, is this a raw video or what? Nobody's going to watch this. Go ahead.
Drilling off a fault line, the San Andreas Fault, hundreds of feet into the seabed.
Well, McVeigh was very different than Kaczynski. He didn't have quite the education that you two had, and so he was of a different personality, but he had the same.
Timothy was more of a psychopath mentality.
I think so. Do you think that he was mind controlled by a program?
I
Never got that in the whole time you were
couldn't
there.
even comment on that.
You couldn't, or you won't.
I couldn't. I mean, I don't know.
You just don't know.
I don't have any information that says yes or no.
What you did tell me was that you said that they killed him. Well, of course, they.
He was being executed. I mean, he was sentenced to death. They executed him.
And you firmly believe that he followed through and did die during the injection, because there is speculation against it. They said that he survived it, and they gave him a new identity and sent him down south. I don't know.
You hear stuff like that, and if they did do something like that, you come right back to people again. The only reason that Aaron Brockovich found out about her case was because people can't keep their mouths shut. They can't. The reason they catch so many people for murder and burglaries and all this other stuff is because they can't keep their mouths shut. If they do something, they got to tell somebody. One of the most famous Nazis, other than Hitler, was Gordon. Gordon has never served a day in jail. The Israelis have never gotten a hold of him. Everybody knows where he lives. He has an address listed on the internet. He lives in Argentina. He's one of the richest men in Argentina.
He was very well protected. But are you going to say that he just
was
didn't?
Very smart. He transferred all his money to Argentina, built an army down there, brought a bunch of Nazis down there, and they all protected. But I mean, now when he got down there, he had a new identity given by the Catholic Church, through their passport system and everything else. Nobody ever would have known it was him. Except he's got a big mouth. He had to tell somebody. Then he had to do a TV interview. And, it's just, that's how people are. And if someone pulled some stunt with McVeigh like that, first of all, that face was all over the world all the time. And that voice was all over the world all the time when he did that. If someone actually pulled some stunt like that, it would already be found out. That's like you hear about when the Twin Towers got hit. They sit there and say, well, the government blew them up. Have you heard that? What do you think would happen when it all came out in the wash that the government did that? What do you think they would do to President Bush if he was involved? He'd be executed. That's high treason. The U.S. wouldn't cover for him at that point. Because remember Ronald Reagan? Everybody loves Reagan. I hate Reagan. Reagan was the biggest piece of trash we ever had as a president.
He created Star Wars, which is...
I'm not even concerned about Star Wars. The fact that his wife's running around telling everybody say no to drugs, and he was the biggest drug dealer in the world at that point, because he was helping the Contras move coke to pay for guns.
So Clinton as well, and everybody on up to our current president.
And what did they do? They dumped it all on Ollie North, saying he did it. But here's the thing. Here was a whole covert operation of moving drugs and buying guns and trying to hide it from Congress. Very minimal amount of people involved. There was only like 5 people involved. But the whole world found out. Do you remember the man who gave them up? Mr. Hassenfuss, the CIA agent that got busted. They threw him in jail down there. And he told his next door neighbor in a cell block who turned around and told them he's CIA. They went and searched his shit, and they found a credit card, they peeled the back off, and it was this damn CIA identity.
No shit.
And that's how Reagan got caught. Talking. That's how people get caught. They talk too damn much. So, if they pulled some stunt like that with McVeigh, it'd already be out of the box. People, I mean, there are conspiracies. Don't get me wrong.
So he did die.
And I'm glad for it. That was a tormented man. He was tormented for years. But he was a product of our society.
Yeah, he didn't get the protection that Ted Kaczynski got simply because Ted...
No, he did. No one touched McVeigh. McVeigh was very well protected because he was a media baby. But the thing about McVeigh is...
Explain what a media baby is. So that...
If you have a very, very high profile case, no one's going to touch you, none of the guards or anything, because your lawyers will have it on CNN the next morning.
And you didn't have that great of a lawyer, so you had to basically...
No, mine was, in the beginning, I would have been on CNN the next day or something if something would have happened. But as time passes, my stuff was kind of minor compared to any of the guys that were in that system.
As well as the fact that they were trying O.J. Simpson, that included everything.
Yeah, that racial bullshit turned around and clouded every case that was going on. But you look at, if you're that high of a profile, they're not touching you. And in the beginning, they kind of left me alone, but as time went on, plus, my standard of violence went higher, where if a cop pushed me at all, I would, what they call take flight on him, which is I would punch him out, kick him, try to stab him. I had no problem with it. I still don't. If someone puts their hands on me, I have a problem. And that's after 19 years of being in an environment where you're defending for your life almost on a constant basis. And you're also very, when people have weapons and you're sitting there in a pair of boxer shorts, you have to show them that you have no fear of them. But Timothy, it's a good thing that he was suffering just with his own demons. And he had been suffering with them since he came back from Iraq. A lot of people didn't agree with the original Iraq war. And he was one of them. And the problem is, you take these guys out, you train them to kill, fight, and everything. You stick them out in the war, and then you bring them home and say, you can't do that anymore, be a good boy. That doesn't work. And McVeigh did. And then McVeigh watched, and the rest of the country should still be appalled. Our Constitution says you're not allowed to use the military against civilians. And in Waco, what did? They used tanks against women, children. That's offensive. And that's what started him on his path that he went down. He was there. There's actually videotapes of him at Waco doing a TV interview. And that's what set him off. The fact that he was I don't know if a lot of people know this, he was a sergeant in a tank division in Iraq. And to make sergeant, you work hard to get there. And then all of a sudden the war ended and they said, well, we don't need you anymore. Well, I want to re-enlist. We're not letting you. A lot of guys were not allowed to re-enlist because they were cutting the budget. And so everything he put his heart and soul in, they took away from him. Then you go to Waco and you see these people who, are women, children, no matter how much, the pastor in that church did or everything else, we have civilian authorities, SWAT teams, whatever, to deal with problems. They could have went in and done something. They didn't have to use tanks. You use the military and civilians. And being a tank driver, that really offended him. Because he knows what a tank can do. And he knew right when they started showing up those guys. That's why he was there. He was like, I can't believe you're doing this. And then, when the Branch Davidian compound collapsed, he was like, he goes, could you imagine how many screams you heard of people burning to death inside the Branch Davidian compound? He was actually there. He heard the noise. He heard death. Yeah. You look it up on the internet. He did an interview with a news show sitting out front of the Branch Davidian compound. He was there, watching it. So he was, truly offended that the U.S. government would use tanks, the military, against the civilians. You should be. Everybody should be.
A guy like that, McVeigh, if that didn't happen, if Waco didn't happen,
You wouldn't have done it.
but if he was around doing the same thing when they took out those children in Connecticut, in Sandy Hook, he probably would have snapped and done the same thing.
I don't know. It's if he had been there, if he had seen it, when you're talking about the components of the mind, anything that happens in the mind is going to be every piece of data that goes into your brain affects the decisions that you make. The more stimulus you have, like actually being at Waco and watching what happened and hearing the screams and smelling the flesh and everything, that all contributes to the decisions you make. And I would say that it would have to be almost by the numbers the same kind of situation for him to have snapped again. But when he decided to do that, our military installations, they're pretty secure and it's hard to get at them. But a building like the federal building in downtown Oklahoma City, where there's not really security, was a prime target.
Why did he choose that building? Did you ever get that from him while you were in?
He was after a government installation.
Just
Also, I don't know if you knew this, the Oklahoma City people, their SWAT team was one of the ones that was down there in Waco. He was either going to go after Austin, or go after Dallas, or go after Oklahoma City.
he was after the same people then that actually committed the crime at Waco. Interesting.
I mean, it wasn't just a random act. I mean, I'm just going to go blow up the building.
Those street cleaners make a lot of noise. Hang on.
It's not just a random act. It's a matter of he was out for revenge against the people who actually did. That wasn't the only building they were going to go after either.
Yeah, but the SWAT team people were not in that building at the time.
Actually, some of them were.
No? So McNichols.
Actually, I want to touch on that. Actually, two of the members that were down in Waco, they weren't the SWAT team members, they were the supervisors, were in the building when it went. And they tried to downplay that and say that they weren't. They weren't. He had the list. See, one thing about court cases is, you know what discovery is? He had his discovery, which had a list of the names of everybody who died.
And that list never made it public? Even through the Freedom of Information?
Most of his, even through the Freedom of Information Act, give me a break. That stuff is restricted on the Freedom of Information Act. You can't even get it. Because when it comes to names of agents and stuff, have you ever tried to...
When you used to share information and pass it, did he show you that list? He did.
He didn't show it to me personally, but it came down to myself. He was showing it to a couple of guys on the tier, and it went to me, and he went into my cell. Oh, you can look at it too. I really had no interest. I really don't have any main interest in Timothy in any manner, because Timothy, you sit and talk to Timothy or listen to him on the tier, he was more annoying than anything else. He was a self-inflated, I'm better than everybody else, a personality. And being who he was basking in his 15 minutes of fame from what he did. And but the true Timothy would come out once in a while where you would hear the remorse, or you would hear, and you get tired of hearing, I did this, I did that, you know.
But when the truth came out, the thing that he focused on were the children. He really felt bad about them.
Well, how many people are going to know that there's a daycare center built into a federal building? Especially back then, that was kind of unheard of. You know, it wasn't. Nowadays it's commonplace for businesses to have daycare built into them. But back then, they didn't. That wasn't there.
I wanted to talk about 48 just because, there's speculation, of course, and proof. People have proven that that building, Oklahoma City Federal Building, was bombed from the inside out. And it's that other guy. Are you able to talk about that?
I mean,
share about
I can just say, I'll just touch on the fact that someone who was literally standing at the site when it detonated, McVeigh said when the truck lit off, that there was a secondary explosion that came in the interior of the building. Now, if that was actually a bomb, you also have to remember that is a federal building. They have armories in there. Weapons, armories, explosives. Chain reactions happen. So if one detonated and it blew up the armory, that could have directly caused, another explosion. So as far as being able to,
so the Ryder truck was basically the fuse that took out whatever they had in that installation, and it wasn't premeditated from the inside out.
It might not.
Well, that would exonerate.
I can't speculate on if there was another explosive, if there was something.
But we do have to say that there were two bombardiers, if you were to call them that.
Yeah.
That were part of the, the whole program of blowing it up. They had.
Well, there's three of them.
Well, there was McNichols, then there was McVeigh, and then 48, and then the other guy. What's his name?
Oh, Randolph?
Randolph.
Randolph wasn't tied to that, but Randolph was in the same unit. The 48 was there.
I see.
And they were, the funny thing is, I don't know if a lot of people knew this either, but 48 and McVeigh served together. They were in the same unit for a while in Iraq. That's how they knew each other. But I mean, I can't say that there was a secondary, bomb. I can say that something detonated. You can speculate that it could have been the armory, which is a well-known fact that they had an armory in there. McVeigh even acknowledged that. I mean, he goes, it was second thought. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. They never thought about the armory being there until the building blew, and then all the, evidence was coming out and it showed the armory. The only thing is the government was never willing to say this is what was in the armory. The evidence, I think it said defensive weapons. Well, defensive weapons could be Laws rockets, it could be C4, it could be grenades, it could be, but when you have a substantial amount in an armory and it detonates,
there you go.
There you go. So,
well, the bomb experts, the engineers that tried to analyze whether that building was sabotaged before it went, say that the metal girders were cut and things like that. Well, I know that in the Trade Center buildings.
The Trade Center buildings, one thing about them is their structural integrity was done years ago anyway. Very unusual design, very poorly built building to begin with. When you look at the actual structure of it, the way it was built, you know, to say that someone went through the building and was cutting girders weeks before, months before, and planning this all out, with over 8,000 people coming in and out of the building that work there every day, and then you had thousands of people coming in as tourists, and no one noticed.
Well, one of the things is, the theory is that the original bomb that went off before us, and somebody went in there and bombed out, you know,
The parking garage.
yeah, that they swept everybody out so that they could clean up that building. That it's quite possible that they went in there and because the trade centers were planned to come down when those trade center buildings were built and before.
Also, you have to look at
So
where the jets actually hit.
That was new, and so their date was planned for 2001.
Yeah, but I mean, look where the jets actually hit in the plane. Fully payloaded planes with tons of fuel on board.
I don't want to record this because I didn't want to get into 9/11.
No, you look at
It's been so covered.
But you look at it. You look at the payload. Look at the heat. And they didn't hit top of the building. They hit mid. When you have all that concrete, steel, and everything else coming down on top of each other, you know, that building wasn't made to support that weight coming down like in shocks like this.
Well, it's been analyzed. Dr. Judy Wood, I believe her name is. I believe her theory a little bit more. I mean, when that ended, it was all dust, and so it was.
But I mean, how are you going to cover up blowing up a building? I mean, honestly,
Can't.
you can't. People will talk, and it comes out.
And they did.
I think that people, yeah, but a lot of those people came up with theories. I read some of them, and I was like, I'm not impressed with that. I mean, there's plenty of things that the government's doing that you can actually prove. That one. And the other thing is, you know, our government has failed us in more ways than one when it comes to that. That same individual, we started him off on his bombing raids anyway. We're the ones that pissed him off.
Well, he was a CIA agent. You know that.
Yeah, for a long time. But what we did was we put women in dock on and that pissed him off. Anyway, McVeigh, you know, you look at him and Timothy wasn't right to begin with.
It's kind of why it's speculated that he had undergone heavy mind control.
I think Timothy's problem, he went under heavy drug use for years.
Did that ever come out while you were there?
Oh, yeah. He always talked about it.
What kind of drugs did he use?
Oh, LSD, weed, cocaine, meth. Before he went to the military, he was a very big drug addict, on and off as a kid, drinker, and
Did that ever come out in the news?
I don't know. I never read all the stuff that came out with him.
Interesting.
But he used to talk to, you know, you hear him talking on the beer.
And that was all on self-will. It wasn't provided
one of
to.
his next door neighbors was Carlos Later. I don't know if you know who he is.
Who?
Carlos Later. You ever heard the name?
No.
He's one of the many cartel guys. He was the one right below Escobar. And he was on a ship going out of a yacht going to the Grand Caymans, and the Coast Guard found out about it, and they intercepted the ship and arrested him. He's got life without him. And that was one of his neighbors. And so here his neighbor is a major cocaine dealer, you know, and they would talk all the time. And you could hear him talking about different drugs, and you know, Carlos going, "Oh, you should have tried this." You know, we were producing it this way. And McVeigh was more than, you know, versed. That's why I find it really hard to, you know, some of McVeigh's lawyers claimed a lot of things, but then you would hear McVeigh talk, and you would be like, you know, it was more of a legal game than anything else. He was a fucked up person.
Yeah. With grandiose delusions.
Oh yeah, very. You you know.
I would have loved to.
Ted was different.
I was going to say.
Ted was an intellectual trying to do something positive in a not so positive manner. And like I said, fluid motion, people are different, things went wrong. And then once you're in for a penny and with a pound, when you're wanted like that, you either keep trying to get your message out or you give up, and you're going to get caught either way. He always said he knew he was going to get caught.
He probably would have gotten away with it if he didn't have a family member turn him in.
No, he was. He knew. He even told me. He told everybody. You know, he goes, "I was going to get caught eventually. I knew it." He goes, "He was actually very surprised that it took so long."
Well, he's a survivalist, which is amazing to me. He was held up in that little tiny cabin.
Nothing but books.
Nothing but books there, huh?
He told me he had like 6,000 books in there. He said, "I barely have room to walk around." He said, "I was always taking my books, and he'd put them in a little cart, and he'd go down to the used bookstore, trade them in for new ones." And he said, "That's it."
You know, he sounds like my mentor, the one that was the star witness for the EPA case that I talked about, that Judge Roll was litigating. He was sitting on that, and Joe had every book you can imagine, and I read as many as I could in the short amount of time that I knew him, for about 3 years. So I really identify with a guy like Ted. Can you turn it off? Okay.
But I'll turn around and get a hold of Paul, because I sent a bunch of stuff to Paul when I was getting out, because I did my legal and all this. I didn't want to be carrying it with me. But I have his BOP number and stuff in there, so I can get it.
Okay.
And I'll get that from Paul. I can call him tonight and have him look in my address book and get it. And you can go ahead and you can write it, and you can ask him yourself. And one thing you really need to do before you
Do they read Ted Kaczynski's mail before they give it to him? They do everybody's. That was a dumb question of me, huh?
They read everybody's mail. They look for keywords. They don't actually like literally read it. They just scan it looking for keywords.
Gotcha.
I mean, if they try to read 1,500 inmates' mail every day, they lose them all. You know what I mean?
I don't even know what I would ask or say to him.
No, just talk to them. Just write it.
Okay.
And just say, I wanted to write you, or, the best way to talk to him in the beginning, because let him open up to you and say, I know you're very intellectual, and, I want to see your point of view on some certain things, and he's a professor. I mean, that's what he loves to teach, so he'd be very,
My forte is more on conspiracy hunting. I look for conspiracies that nobody's seen, and I'm not very much of a political science guy. And
conspiracy and political science are actually.
I mean, if I were to tell Ted I found the cure for all diseases, he would just kind of look at it and go, "Okay."
No, you'd say, "Okay, show me." He's a professor.
Well, I wish I could show him my YouTube articles, but he doesn't have internet or anything.
Yeah, he does.
Oh, no kidding. But how do you contact them through email? Do they filter through that?
I'd have to get my address book, but...
Do they filter through that and read before?
Everything. If you're going to send an email, because the federal prisons have gone to emails now, you can do those. But to send an email, first of all, you have to pay for it. Hey, the prisoners in, Ted pays for X amount of emails per month. And then they read them. Like, if you sent it right now, it wouldn't go out till tomorrow, because it has to go through their main
filter
database, and then they look through it, and you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're very much so in control of everything they...
I know there's a lot of other people that would really like to connect with these people.
Which I'm going to tell you, don't give anybody else's information.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's not a decision You know, if he answers you, he answers you. But if he, you know, it's not right. It'd be like this. If you gave me your phone number.
You know, I'm not going to even share your information with anybody. I know this one guy from that Red Dirt report, Andrew. I won't even give him your contact information because he's going to try to dig into McVeigh and you've already shared that, you know, this is personal, but McVeigh's dead anyway. I don't know.
It's still personal. It's his
still
family.
personal.
He still has a family and
there you
know,
go.
everything else, and they have the right to privacy.
That's right. It's ethical.
Especially his family. I mean, they're the ones that suffered the worst of all that. You know, because people hate them just because they were related to them. They have nothing to do with it.
Guilt by association.
None of us like that. And so, you know, but it'd be like giving out somebody, like if you gave me your personal phone number and I started passing it out to people, that's wrong. You don't do that.
One of my investigator friends, he did that.
Yeah, that's not cool.
Yeah, that's why I felt bad when, well, the thing is that I've had the same thing happen to me. And you wanted to talk about Greenpeace, and you had something to share.
You know,
Let's let that bus go by a little bit. It's not my choice. We chose this studio.
I did.
It's all right.
Think about Greenpeace. Just looking at their website today and everything, and who's in charge. And
Well, tell us who's in charge and what you feel about it.
Kamali's still in charge. She's the CEO of Greenpeace International, which means she's also the CEO over Greenpeace USA. And looking at what they're doing now, it's more of a political company instead of being a environmental awareness group. They've gone more political, you know, they have a big campaign against Macintosh right now, Apple. You know, that they're boycotting iProducts, period, because they're bad for the environment. And they say the battery systems in the Apples are bad for the environment.
Why? Because they got mercury in it? Or
Yeah,
what?
I mean, the battery in your Droid, battery in your phone, is the exact same system that's in the iProducts. If they have a company problem,
They've gotten away from saving the whales, is what you're saying.
yeah, they're doing it for money though.
So what's your profound ideas after looking at those articles?
That the campaign that I'm going to be launching against them in the next 6 months,
Why do you want to go after them?
because they're wrong. What they're doing is wrong. They're destroying people's lives. It's wrong. They're taking advantage of the public. It's wrong. And I have an inside track on that.
You certainly do.
And being one of their PhDs in the beginning, they, you know, I don't want to see this happen to another person. And don't get me wrong, I don't see Paul Watson as being a brilliant individual either. You know, the most dangerous person in the world is the person with a cause.
Every organization has been infiltrated, and or the people that run them originally had their genuine concept of how things get, and then somehow their minds are changed. It's all about money, product promotion. Yeah. Should I turn this on?
Well, you can ask questions. Is there anything you wanted to know about?
I don't know much about anything anymore. the kind of action that you're going to take, is it going to be totally, well, I'm sure. We don't want to go back to ADX.
I'm just going to reassure you.
You're not on parole, are you?
No parole, no probation. I did 100% of my time.
You don't have to check back. Do you think that you're being tracked or monitored?
Even if I am, I don't care.
You know, there's a situation that I was in. I carried that buck knife that I told you. It was a beautiful knife. And before I had lost it, I was waiting at a bus bench for the local city bus, and sitting on the bench was this very, very tall guy. He was a couple inches taller than you. You're 6'1". This guy had to have been 6'3", 4". Long arms dragging knuckles on the ground, and he was drunk as a skunk. But you know, we struck up a conversation. He seemed nice enough. He was just sitting there while I was standing, and he had a bag of things that he had just purchased, a couple posters from the store and whatever, maybe a backpack. And he was looking for something, and then finally he realized that he didn't have his cell phone with him. He stood up, and I saw how fucking gargantuan this guy was. It's like, oh my God, I had a really dark sensation overwhelm me, and what happened was that he started blaming me for stealing his cell phone. And I had my cell phone on my belt, and he was accusing me of doing it, and there were other people there. One person sitting on the bench and a couple of other people, and then there were people walking by. Of course, there's traffic. And he started trying to grab at my pockets to see if I had a cell phone, but really I think he was going for my wallet. Who the hell knows what he was, but the thing is that it ended up in he was trying to fight me, and I knew that I could not pull out my knife. I had to leave that knife in the sheath as long as I possibly could, because everybody with a cell phone can easily dial 911, and I just tried to play hard to catch, you know. But he finally wrapped himself around me, you know, and smashed me against the wall. My glasses went flying, and I'm blind without my glasses. And it was during the time that I was investigating the Gabriel Gifford shooting, and I knew that I couldn't get rolled up, because then that would stop the whole investigation. But it was the wildest thing. He pushed me into traffic. I was into the bicycle lane with my head right there, the car lane, and a car whizzed by, and I could feel it. I could feel the tires just whiz right by my head. You know, I could have been squashed like a watermelon. And it was a realization in my life that instantly it'd all be over. And I felt much like, I guess, not much like, maybe just a fraction of what you felt like during the time that they sat you down for all those years. All those guards with weapons pointed at you the whole time. Yeah, and it's hard to not want. And I had to look at the situation, because I could have called it in. Because when the bus finally came 11 minutes late, that was the only reason why this happened, because if it was on time, that would never would have happened. The driver asked me if I wanted to call it in, because I told her what happened. And I said no, because at that moment I realized that as long as I'm still alive, it's all right. She said, that guy, he'll get himself into trouble anyway during that day. I knew it. He was so damn drunk that it wasn't my point to get other people in trouble for their actions. It's trying to go at the cause, the bigger picture, and solve the problem. And everything that I do on Dismantle the Beam Project and Veritas Cures, where I show my treatments and solutions for health, It's all designed for everybody. I have to stay alive for it. I have to post that material up for as long as I can before they scrub it.
How can you be part of it?
And I don't know. When I first met you, I almost felt the same in your heart that that's what you wanted to do too for the ecology. That it's important for our world to survive the devastation that's happening with poison, toxic poisoning of the air, the water, our space, our atmosphere. They use HARP to lower the ceiling down. This is stuff I'm not going to post on the internet. Just my thoughts. You came up with your thesis was fascinating to me. Want to talk about your thesis again? I think it would be good to have it on tape. Well, you're like me. You find a mystery and then you solve it. I call myself a puzzler. Solve puzzles.
Starts now.